I've called you all here today to explain to you some of the things that we've been hearing in the news so that you will not be ignorant of the facts of the events that are going on around you. Tennessee,
when you try to reenact the past, I think it's impossible to keep your perceptions and the way you understand the past from slipping into the mindset that you're trying to portray from 1861. A great example in the film is when one of the teachers talks about that, well, free blacks back in the
larger
slavery
percentage
period,
of free Negroes who own Negroes than the percentage of white men and women who own Negroes.
Well, that would be the type of argument that you don't find in the historical record of the time. They were not justifying slavery because blacks owned slaves.
There was just like an incredibly small number of free blacks that owned slaves. First of all, just the numbers of people, numbers of slaves, we're talking about 4 million slaves. So the number of free blacks were like 200,000 free blacks, and of those only 4,000 owned slaves. And what we mean by owning slaves is also really complicated because some people would buy their wives or their children out of bondage.
One reason freed blacks bought slaves is so that they could keep families together, so that they could treat them benevolently in a way that they weren't being treated by white masters, certainly not always. And I think it's important to understand that black slavery had a very particular context. To simply throw it in there and to say that blacks owned more slaves than white people is simply bad history.
I really believe that if left alone, slavery will run its course and we will see that it is not best for our economy and it is not best for the people who own slaves nor for the people who are
Slavery in 1860 is absolutely thriving. People also like to say, oh, the slave trade stopped. So that was like this big thing that kind of like, again, contributed to slavery, like it was gonna die out. Like, absolutely not, because like what happened was, that's what like completely boosted interior slave trading. So that's why there are slave markets in New Orleans and slave markets in all these southern cities where like, we have to move slaves around.
And what does the Bible say about being a slave?
The other point that he makes is that slavery's been around for a long time. It's sanctioned by the Bible. This is right out of 1861. This is what Southerners said all along.
Instructed in the Bible that if
on one hand, he's being true to 1861 by saying this is what they would have said. The problem is you're never quite sure if he's channeling 1861 or if he's telling these young people in the 21st century that in fact you do know slavery wasn't really wrong because it was sanctioned by the Bible. Again, there's a real strong blurring here of the past and the present and the future, and you're never quite sure where those lines are. He's creating seeds of doubt, and you see it in these young ladies when they walk out on the porch afterwards and they're all saying to each other, I didn't know that.
Oh no, I didn't know there was a bigger percentage.
And that, I think, is where the real danger comes in, because you are planting this seed that somehow slavery wasn't wrong, it wasn't immoral, blacks owned other blacks at a higher percentage than other people did, and it was, after all, sanctioned by the Bible.
One of the girls says, you know, the Southerners are always the bad guys.
The bad guys with the slavery and everything.
Well, we could just dismiss that as a kind of willful, racist, ignoring of history or denial. I think you could also see in it a kind of longing to have some way to claim a Southern identity that's not laden with the weight of Southern oppression, of slavery, of the civil rights movement, even of racial struggles now in the South, which continue.
No one is trying to get you to feel bad about your ancestors. I'm trying to get you to take them on the terms that they lived on. They weren't ashamed of any of this. By our standards, everybody in the U.S. was racist in 1861. But we can't begin to understand them or what they believed in or the world they created, their values, the social structure of the world they lived in every day if we don't take it at face value.
Well, you would hope that you could find a way to be Southern that didn't need to feel oppressive or guilty. I don't think we've had very many successful conversations as Americans about our racial past. And this is true in the South, and it's true across the country. And until we confront those past with some kind of honesty, there's going to be guilt and recrimination and play acting.
When we don't face those realities and talk about them and understand them, we continue to live in a fantasy. And we're doomed to repeat the past because we never came to grips with the realities of what that was like.